This is Tim Hannigan, one of 6 cavers who decided to explore a well-known cave in Australia. However, there's one section of the cave that rarely gets visited because of its difficult downward position. Despite the risks, the group chose to take that path, which soon became the focus of national conversations about the dangers this cave could pose. New South Wales is a state on the eastern side of Australia. The first people believed to have lived here arrived about 60,000 years ago. Among the indigenous groups in the region are the Burra people, who once roamed an area of about 4,100 square miles, including the rugged Blue Mountains. This region is known for its deep valleys, towering ridges, and tough terrain. One standout feature within their territory is a network of caves that the Burra people called dark places. Today, these caves are known as the Jenolan caves. The history of the Jenolan caves goes far beyond the Aboriginal Australians who explored them tens of thousands of years ago. Speleologists have found that these caves began forming around 340 million years ago, making them the oldest known open cave system in the world. They're also some of the most visited caves today. Inside, visitors can see Aboriginal artwork on the walls, ancient marine fossils, and beautiful calcite formations. These wonders started drawing large numbers of tourists in the 1880s. By the early 1900s, cave exploration and mapping efforts, all done by candlelight, were in full swing. These discoveries cemented the Jenolan Cave's reputation as a world-class cave system, stretching over 25 miles with more than 300 entrances. As tourism to the caves grew, so did efforts to make them more accessible. Permanent lighting, stairs, and handrails were added to certain sections, allowing people of all abilities to explore the caves safely. Today, the Jenolan Caves offer a range of experiences. The sections with man-made safety features are called show caves, providing an easier and more structured way to explore. For those looking for a slightly more challenging adventure, there are 10 dark caves. These caves still have stairs and handrails, but maintain a more natural feel, with no permanent lighting. Then, there are the adventure caves, which are completely untouched. These can be explored either independently or as part of a guided tour. Surprisingly, the adventure caves have had the fewest emergencies, even though they are considered the riskiest option. In fact, most medical technicians and cave rescuers in the area have never been called to respond to an incident in the adventure caves. But that all changed in early 2024. On the afternoon of March 30th, 6 cavers from the National University Caving Club of Canberra arrived at the Jenolan Caves for a planned 4-hour, self-guided excursion. While the caves are popular with tourists, they are also a favorite spot for the club because of their remote location and untouched sections. The group was familiar with the cave system, though they had never explored the specific adventure section they planned to visit that day. Once they arrived, they quickly suited up and made their way toward the entrance. For most of the 4-hour journey, the group navigated narrow, body-sized tunnels and squeezed past tight obstacles, exploring one of the more challenging sections of the cave. This included a feature known as the row hole, the final restriction of the day. It was also the most claustrophobic and demanding part of the trip. The narrow, downward-angled tunnel that led through this spot resembled a naturally formed chimney and eventually opened up to the exit. When the group reached the row hole, the first 4 members carefully maneuvered through the tight space, successfully making it to the other side. All 4 were small in build, and with the help of gravity, they had no trouble squeezing through. The remaining 2 members, Tim and Eliza, waited their turn. After some discussion, they decided Tim would go first. Tim ducked his head into the tunnel and began inching forward, just like the others had done. With his shoulders tucked in to reduce his profile, he scooted forward on his elbows, carefully navigating the increasingly narrow passage. However, Tim didn't realize just how tight the walls would become the deeper he went. As he pressed on, it quickly became clear this was the most challenging squeeze he'd ever faced. About a body's length from the entrance, Tim reached a bend in the tunnel. The passage was nearly vertical and still incredibly tight, requiring him to twist and turn his body in awkward ways to continue. Tim contorted himself to match the tunnel's shape at the bend, but then he realized something was wrong. A rock jutting out from the wall had caught him at the perfect angle, trapping him in place. He wiggled and squirmed, desperately trying to free himself, but he couldn't move forward or backward. In a matter of seconds, Tim was completely trapped. He tried to push back, but with the gravity working against him and the tight squeeze of the walls, it seemed impossible. To make things worse, Eliza had started crawling right behind him and was now stuck as well, positioned directly behind him. This was the only exit in the area. Tim told Eliza he couldn't move any further and asked her for help, hoping she could push him onto his feet. But Eliza couldn't even stretch her arms far enough to help. What made the situation even more dangerous was Tim's position. He was almost entirely upside down. And for anyone familiar with the infamous Nutty Putty Cave incident, the dangers of this position were all too clear. For those who may not know, in 2009, two brothers explored Nutty Putty Cave in Utah. One of them accidentally crawled into a narrow crevice he thought was a tunnel. When he realized it was a dead end, he was trapped, almost entirely upside down, with no way to push himself back up the slope. Over the next 28 hours, hundreds of rescuers worked tirelessly to free him, but the extreme tightness of the passage and the angle of his position made the rescue incredibly difficult. Tragically, the man died of cardiac arrest the following day, caused by the strain of being inverted for such a long time. In an upside-down position, the heart has to work significantly harder to pump blood through the body. Over time, this increased workload can overwhelm the heart, leading to failure. Unfortunately, this process doesn't take long. Tim, likely unaware of the full extent of the danger, called out to the others. From his upside-down position, the others realized they couldn't reach Tim without special equipment. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Eliza used their emergency communication device to call for help. At 7:20 p.m., the call to emergency services initiated a race against time. Rescue teams rushed to the Jenolan caves, fully aware of the complexity of the task ahead. Upon arrival, the rescue team immediately assessed the situation and recognized the enormous challenge. The tight space around Tim and his precarious, inverted position made this one of the most difficult rescue attempts they had ever faced. Before any attempts to free Tim could begin, paramedics entered the row hole to assess his condition and provide him with water. While they attended to him, the rescue group began devising a plan. Initially, the team considered approaching from the entrance side to pull Eliza back first, and then Tim. However, after an hour of trying, they realized that pulling against gravity from the narrow tunnel was not only nearly impossible, but would also likely cause severe injuries to both Eliza and Tim as they were scraped against the cold rock. Instead, the team focused on the rock that had trapped Tim in the tunnel. They determined that the key to freeing him would be to chip away at the tight walls around the obstruction, allowing Tim to crawl toward the exit. The rescue member Craig Gibbons positioned himself for the task, entering the cave head first and face up, carefully making his way to the spot just below where Tim was suspended upside down. Once in place, he explained to Tim what he was about to do. With a drill in hand, Craig began creating holes in the protruding section of the rock wall to make it easier to chip away at. When the initial drilling was done, he retrieved a chisel and instructed Tim to stay as still as possible. Then, just inches from Tim's face, the chisel made its first careful strike on the rock. For nearly 10 grueling hours, the rescue team worked tirelessly in the dark, confined space, fully aware that Tim's life was on the line. Finally, at 4:45 a.m. on Easter Sunday, the breakthrough came. The obstruction was removed, allowing Tim to crawl through the row hole. Exhausted but relieved, he emerged from the Jenolan caves on his own. greeted by the early morning light. Eliza followed closely behind, maneuvering cautiously through the tunnel before walking out to safety. Despite the harrowing ordeal and the potentially deadly outcome, both Tim and Eliza were surprisingly in good spirits. Remarkably, the spot where Tim had become trapped was only about 130 feet from the cave exit. He had been less than 10 minutes away from completing the adventure when the incident occurred. The Jenolan Caves remains one of the most famous cave expeditions in the region, but the adventure section is now known for its reputation, making many cavers think twice before entering the darkness. For more in-depth stories like this one, be sure to explore our channel.